Hello, ladies and gentlemen. That's the second Nodrik podcast. I'm doing it today with my co-host and best friend Cordelh. And our guest is Mercury Black from Sorting Myself Out YouTube channel. All the links will be provided below, so please check it out. It's amazing. Okay. Mercury.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
My honor, man.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, Mercury, could you please tell us what your YouTube channel is about? Sorting Myself Out.
Okay, so the channel was originally started by somebody else. Andrew started the channel based on Jordan Peterson's self-authoring program. And so when he did the channel, he posted a lot of clips from Dr. Peterson. He did some podcasts, but the bulk of his own material was talking about him doing the self-authoring program himself. So working on making certain changes and sharing his journey with the audience. I ended up meeting him because my imaginary friends told me to reach out to him. We became friends. I ended up kind of serving as a mentor to him to a certain degree. He would ask my advice on things on the channel. At a certain point, he asked me to record a couple podcasts with him, so I did a few podcasts when he was running the channel. And eventually he decided that he didn't want to do the channel anymore. It was a combination of him having spoken about personal things that he later regretted sharing, combined with he was doing much better in the majority of the things. Actually, no, I would say in all the fields where he was trying to make improvement when he was doing the channel. He had made significant improvements, and he was just ready to go on and live his life. Rather than just shutting the channel down, he asked me and Ryan Holsapple to take it over. And for about a year and 4 months or something like that, not quite a year and a half, me and Ryan ran the channel together. And rather than it being about either of our personal journeys, we expanded it more into it being about assisting others at sorting themselves out. So me and Ryan would share what we were going through and how we were sorting ourselves out, but we also brought audience guest members on, like guest audience appearances. We did podcasts with experts on a wide variety of topics, but sticking around the idea of sorting oneself out. The beginning of July, so not quite 2 months ago, my partner Ryan decided to resign. And so I'm running the channel myself now. We had already brought on a couple volunteers before he resigned. And I'm expanding that now into a larger team because I'm just some fucking lunatic that can't run a YouTube channel. I require support to keep this going. And fortunately, there have been some wonderful souls that have stepped up to volunteer significant amount of time and energy without getting paid. So that's a godsend, and essentially the goal of the channel is to help people pull themselves together. Personally, I think we're in the apocalypse, whatever that means, and I'm here to attempt to midwife whatever's coming next. And I'm just doing what I can do to help those people whom I'm capable of helping.
It's beautiful.
People would like to reach out to you and help you. How can they do that? Would they just like write a comment in any of the videos you do under Sorting Myself Out? Should they join your Discord?
Discord's the best, or anyone can write into, and I'll give you all the links after, so they'll be below.
That's for sure.
We have a channel email, sortingmyselfout0@gmail.com. I myself don't check that. I leave that to the other members to check that one. The team checks that. Anyone who wants to contact me directly because they want a private session or because they just don't feel comfortable talking to anyone else at all, you can join our Discord, and that's the place where I let people message me directly. Oh yeah, and I guess I didn't say this before. So aside from what I do on the channel, I do private sessions with people. They're entirely free. And yeah, and if anyone wants to arrange a private session with me, you can write into the channel. Just be aware team members will read anything that goes to the channel. If someone wants to write to me directly, they can write to me on Discord. And I use my full name there. I'm Mercury Black. So yeah, if anyone wants a private session because they need help, they can write to me there. If anyone's looking to volunteer on the channel, they can write in either spot. Or just if you're in some similar field, if you've also got a channel about mental health or spirituality, philosophy or something like that, and you're interested in collaborating, coming on my channel for a podcast, having me on yours, same thing. You can write in any of those spots.
And I might add to that something. I actually did reach out to you. I heard you talking on Discord, and I reached out to hang out with you privately. And we did. We spent more than 10 hours talking, I think, already. And
me and Cordelh might be getting closer to 20.
Definitely. Like, you're Cordelh, like, I can attest to that. Like, hanging out with Cordelh is always a delight. Like, people do get addicted to that. Everybody. And, the point is, it's not what it seems on the surface. If people want to have an actual deep and meaningful conversation with somebody who will get it, Mercury, you're the best person to talk to. Sorry, Cordelh. Cordelh is fun.
Okay.
Like, Cordelh is fun, but actual meaningful conversations, please reach out to Mercury. I totally advise it. And, yeah.
That's very sweet. Thank you.
Even though we spent a lot of hours talking together, from your personal life, I learned one thing. You did have a near-death experience where time stood still. And I would like to know more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see how to set the stage. I was living in Toronto at the time, and I was not the person I am now. I was very much unaware of what I was. I did not understand the concept of mindfulness. I thought I was my thoughts. I thought I was my emotions. While I was involved in subculture, I was a punk and I was into independent film and all the, counterculture kind of thing. I still was just as brainwashed as everyone else, in a way, because I still really didn't know what I was. I experienced the world in a very mundane way. I was working as a security guard, and my shift ended at 4 a.m. It was raining lightly, and, I was in my security uniform, so it's dark clothing, on my way home. Very tired, very unhappy with the job I was doing, very unhappy with where I was in life at that moment. And as I was crossing the street, and I had the walk symbol. And as I took a few steps out, the hand started flashing, which means it was still, I still had the right of way and everything. But I remember I looked to the south because the way I was going was north. And so I knew I didn't have to rush to get across the street, but I was looking to see if a bus was coming as to whether or not I had to rush up to my own bus stop. So as I, started walking out into the intersection, I was looking south. And as I brought my head around like this, suddenly there was a bus just very, very close to me. I actually didn't even have time to process at first that it was a bus. It was a large vehicle. I saw the two headlights. And as I was turning my head towards it, I saw those headlights. And it's a kind of a dangerous intersection where the bus driver was coming around a blind spot. My first impulse, I had that, oh, fuck, there's a car coming. And I went to jump forward, like to rush forward to get out of the way. And it seemed I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. And there was this moment of panic and confusion. For some reason, I thought, okay, if I can't move forward, I'll try to move backwards instead. And so I tried to turn and jump backwards. I found again, I couldn't move. And then I noticed that I could actually feel the muscles in my legs, like tensing. And I realized I'm not paralyzed. Time's frozen. And then I noticed, like, it's been a moment that I've been struggling with figuring out, am I paralyzed or what's going on? And the bus isn't moving. And I couldn't even turn my head any further. Like, I could see it. My head was only turned slightly, and I could see the bus that my eyes were turned. I could see those lights. And I noticed then, like, the strange sort of calmness started settling in as I realized time was paused. And I noticed all the little droplets in the air. And it was that sort of misty rain where it's not large droplets. It's just these little fine particles floating everywhere. And then everything just sort of went dim. And my focus was on the raindrops, the street lights catching them. And it's like that shifted into stars, as if suddenly I was in deep space. And then the stars faded out, and I was just in this blackness. Oh, I'm sorry, the thought that caused that to happen, like right before I focused on the rain, actually, sorry. So before I focused on the rain, that calmness settled in when I was having this panic. Am I paralyzed? What do I do? Then I realized time was frozen. As I realized time was frozen, I just evaluated. And I thought, okay, I don't have time to do anything. There's nothing I can do. I'm going to get hit by this large vehicle. And it was once I realized there was nothing to do, that it was just going to happen, that I noticed the raindrops. And noticed that they were beautiful. And that shifted into the stars. And then I found myself just in this black void. And I think it's the same, it's the place when people see a tunnel and they see light. But the light wasn't there. It wasn't open on the other end. The door wasn't open. It was just that blackness of death. And it felt so beautiful, and comforting. And I realized I still had a sense of self, but I wasn't in my body. And I wasn't in an astral body that was human-shaped. I've had that experience since then. Either I'm delusional or I have an astral body. I've been in that. But this was different. It wasn't a humanoid shape at all. I felt spherical. And I felt like I didn't have a hard border. I felt like the edge of me faded out. And I didn't know where the edge of it was. But it was kind of concentrated in a sphere that's maybe just a little more than tip to tip of my fingers spread out like this. And I had those worries that we would all have. I was married at the time. I've been married twice, but I was married. I was involved with trauma films. I had a life going that I was working towards. And all these thoughts, like, what about, is my wife, is she going to be okay? How's she going to, and the things go through your head, being behind in bills, the ways I support her, I thought about all those problems. And not words, just this sort of wordless communication. There was this expression of she's going to be fine. I thought about my mother and sister particularly, but my whole family. And I thought how upset they're going to be that I'm dead. And this feeling was just that it was fine. And I thought about the things I wanted to accomplish. I had worked on a movie that hadn't come out yet. I hadn't gotten to see myself in it. And that seemed so important to me. But that darkness just said that it didn't matter, that everything was okay. And there was this feeling like everything is perfect. Every star is exactly where it's supposed to be. down to every speck of dust, is exactly where it's supposed to be. Every person is exactly who they are supposed to be. Every problem is there for a reason. It's all perfect. That yes, it's your responsibility when you're alive, but that death isn't, it's not a punishment, it's not an end, it's a graduation. And I felt all the stresses fall away. And it feels like home and this deep love over there. And I wanted to stay. And then suddenly, I just felt myself, there's this beautiful stillness there. And then I didn't feel the impact of the bus hit me flat on my left side. I didn't actually feel the impact. Just one moment, I'm still in blackness. And the next, I'm firing through space. It just felt, and I mean, in reality, I went from standing still to 30 kilometers or whatever the bus was going in an instant. Just suddenly I was pulled out of that void and flying through the air. And I felt myself hit the pavement. I didn't feel the bus hit. And just suddenly I was lying there in brutal fucking pain. Like pulled back from this glorious space of just infinite love. Slammed down onto a cold, wet Toronto street full of pain. And everything changed for me after that. That's when I went bipolar. And so the psychiatrists and such say that, and given my family history on my father's side, there's definitely insanities running our family a long time, I expect. And so psychiatrists said I could have become bipolar sooner if something had happened. That if I hadn't gotten hit by the bus, perhaps I never would have become bipolar, or perhaps it would have just been a matter of time. That I had the genetic predisposition to it. So yeah, that's how I got slammed down into the pavement, pulled out of that infinite dimension of beautiful darkness. And that started me on a path down to the other kind of darkness. I think within 2 months of being hit by that bus, I was locked up against my will in an insane asylum. And that's when my wife left me when I was in there. Completely destroyed my life. On 6/6/6, I was in an insane asylum being threatened with electroshock therapy. I don't forget that date, June 6, 2006. And at the time, I would not have thought there was anything worth going through that. It was still years before I could accept that I was bipolar. I went through a whole nother cycle, extreme end of the world psychosis, and then another couple of years of depression before I could accept being insane. But that first time around, the therapist told me, I'm sorry, they didn't instantly say I was bipolar. The idea was that I might be bipolar now, but the consensus was that it was possible it was just an extreme PTSD reaction, and that with the proper therapy, I might be able to get back to normal. So when I finally got out of the mental institution and crash landed at home at my parents in utter failure, having lost the whole life I had, the goal we all set for me was to get me back to normal. And that did not go well. It wasn't until I finally accepted. It was hard because I did not want to be insane. And I didn't think I looked down on crazy people. I thought of myself as being very open-minded. I had plenty of friends who were schizophrenic or this or that, I thought I wasn't judgmental of that. But I realized I couldn't accept being that myself. And so maybe I didn't treat them lesser because of whatever they were. But I wasn't open-minded enough to treat myself lovingly if I was insane. And I hadn't accepted ego death or any of that at that point. So it defined me. in a way that it doesn't define me now. And no, I didn't want to be a lunatic. I didn't want to be a madman. I didn't want to be subhuman. I was quite prideful in my previous life. But eventually I accepted it and found it to be a dangerous gift rather than a curse.
I actually would not notice you as being different from other people. Even to say it more, you have an ability to express or describe the situation clearly. It's amazing. I witnessed...
That doesn't make me any less insane. That just makes me intelligent, mindful, and articulate. You can be all of those things and insane at the same time.
Cordelh had also near-death experience, and I wanted to hear, maybe compare notes, because I never had anything like that.
Well, when you talked about time freezing, I can relate to that. Like, totally. Like, not only can I relate to it in the perspective of in the moment time froze, but in my personal experience I have a tendency to go back to that precise moment of my life quite often in my mind. I usually try to avoid the subjects, and I write poems about it, which helps me to deal with it. I haven't found any truth, or at least nothing that is, life-changing in my own experience. And what mostly I had to face was questions with no answer. I would constantly come back, to that moment and question, what if I had done something else? What if I had put different choices? What if I had, different things? And so for me, for example, it left me in a place that was more of confusion than a revelation. Now, perhaps, and most probably, living an experience like that is a revelation in itself, because it leads to so much confusion. And that I could, reason. Like, I could see why something would have meaning out of meaninglessness. Because, the duality of everything, basically. Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised personally that you would use your personal experience to help people around you. It makes sense, that if you have lived something like that, and in some ways you manage to see something beyond such an event, then it makes sense that you would try to, put your hands towards somebody and say, hey, get up out of the, out of the troubles. So that I like I like your story, basically. It's a good plot. If I was to write a story, it's a good way to start helping others, and I suspect that you will be helping a lot of people, actually, in this length of all your existence in general.
I've talked a few times with people close to me who know me quite well, and we all agree that if you took my life story and wrote it as a fictional, like presented it to an editor as a fictional story that is supposed to be set in the real world, that the feedback you would get from the editor is this story is not realistic enough to be believable. I'm aware my life's a fascinating story, but also the truth of it seems unbelievable. Like right down to I made friends with someone who had a YouTube channel and he gave me the channel and it turned into what it is now. It's like, that's not realistic. That doesn't happen. But beyond all the other weird shit that's happened to me.
It is humane though. I mean, it is a very humane story. I love it. It's, you know, like, you're right. Most people would hear more stories and be like, what the hell, you know? Like, where did that come from? But the truth is that reality itself has a side to itself that is quite unreal, you know? And this year particularly, I'm pretty sure a lot of people can say that it is a very unreal year. So, you know.
Life doesn't make narrative sense. That's like my favorite saying. I do see correlations between your story and his. You both help others in a different way, but still, both of you chose to help others. Cordelh writes a lot. He completely describes it. He has his rant to which exposés that he does. And you, Mercury, have a YouTube channel where you have like 36,000 subscribers who can hear you out. And people keep joining in. People don't abandon. Like, people hear your story and they keep listening. They keep being interested.
There's plenty of subscribers who have never seen the channel since I've taken it over. I'm certain. Because now and then I'll still get a comment when I'm live. It's funny. Some people will mistake me for Andrew. Mm-hmm. Will comment something like, Andrew, you look really different. And like, he also shaves his head. And he's also Canadian, so sometimes I'll make the joke that that's racist to say all Canadians look alike. But no, our subscriber count doesn't reflect how many people support me at all. I have no idea how many of those people are aware, but our Discord, the small community, it is growing. But numbers are irrelevant, so let's ignore the number so I don't have to, respond to feeling like you're overinflating. Some people find what I'm doing useful. And absolutely, in particular, the people who join the community, who do private sessions with me, or who come to lunatic patrols, where, groups of us talk, definitely they're looking for someone who's actually going to pay attention to them and not be thinking about their bills or thinking about, other shit in the back of their mind. The same way that a small child comes to their parents with a drawing, they want you to stop and pay full attention to it. They don't want you to just look up and say, that's nice, and go back to reading the paper. They want you to stop and pick it up and look at it closely. So there's definitely people that's why they're interacting with the community. But I think also, even on the side of people who are just watching, it's still that same hunger. People want to be seen for what they actually are. A lot of people have a deep need for that. But they wear masks everywhere they go. So of course they don't feel like anyone knows. They don't show who they are. And I think one of the things I do for a lot of people is, like you pointed out, it doesn't matter where I go, I'm me. I don't give a shit. I'm not going to make something up to impress anyone. Just look, this is me, I'm being fully myself. And some people find that, just that, inspiring. It doesn't matter, like any of the good qualities you might want to attach to me. Those don't even matter on the most essential level. Anyone could step up and just be honestly themselves publicly, and some of those people watching me would watch them too. They're hungry, especially people with mental illnesses, insanity, whatever you want to call it, natural shamans. A lot of us are walking around with heavy fucking shame and guilt just about what we are. Not even just the fucking crazy people. Like, men don't cry, that whole fucking thing. Fuck you, human beings cry. Or even just the irony and the sarcasm in our culture, or photoshopping all your pictures before you put them up so that you can present yourself as something better than you are. If you touch up a photo to get 1 million likes, you feel like you're ugly because you didn't show them you. And if all your friends accept you because you don't cry in front of them, you don't feel like they accept you. You feel like these guys would leave me if they knew I cry myself to sleep 5 nights a week. In the Joker movie, he writes, the worst thing about having a mental illness is people expect you to behave as if you don't. Always loved that. Yes, that's brutal. If you're depressed and you're expected to behave as if you're not depressed, that's brutal. But I'd take it further and I'd say, now, the worst thing about being human is people expect you to behave as if you aren't. Human beings get over emotional. We cry, we wet the bed, we don't look perfect, we have blemishes, we get overexcited. We get enthusiastic about stupid things. We make mistakes, and we embarrass ourselves. That's being human. But we're supposed to act as if none of that exists. Of course we don't feel seen. Of course we don't feel loved.
It's intense as a subject of conversation. Like it does have a lot of meaning.
And you're right that I don't attach my identity to any of this shit that's going on right now. I've spent years in isolation. I got past any need to achieve anything down here. And in fact, you said earlier that me and Cordelh are similar and that we're both working very hard to help people. But even in that, I think he and I frame it differently. He does think. He has a strong motivation to help others. I've heard him bring that up repeatedly. It's deeply integrated into his being, the desire to help others. That's not actually what I'm operating as. I have angels and guides and experiences of God. I don't know if that's a delusion or a real metaphysical thing. I'm just saying phenomenologically, I experience that shit. My number one thing I'm trying to do is get good with the angels. So I'm helping people because that's what they told me. But like in 2011 is when my archangel appeared to me. And that's a story on its own. I thought that was the beginning of psychosis. It was going to put me back in a mental institution because at that point, I'd never made it through a manic cycle without getting locked up. But I cultivated a relationship with whatever that is, that delusion, that entity, whatever it is. I cultivated a relationship with it and essentially put myself under its training. Everything I'm doing now is what upper management told me to do. So it's like I don't define my goal as helping people. My goal is I work directly for upper management, and they're the ones I'm concerned about what they think about me. So it's not that I don't care what anyone thinks about me. It's that I care what my invisible friends think about me the most. They've trained me for this. And it's not just what the voices in my fucking head tell me. It's that reality and synchronicity lines up with it as well. So God speaks to me through everything. Physical reality around me and the thoughts and visions in my head. That has communicated to me that I'm supposed to be doing this. But helping others is the secondary goal. Primary goal making my father proud of me. Like the one upstairs. That's what I'm obsessed with. Because to me, is there an afterlife? Like, I have an atheist subpersonality. Absolutely. I have a part of my brain that looks at everything. It sees even my near-death experience as, the chemical process occurring that is how our brain shuts down. And there's really nothing after that. But the vast majority of me is essentially certain that there's an afterlife. Phenomenologically, that appears to be real to me. And that's how I live my whole life now, because that's a way bigger fucking deal than life down here.
I have heard you mentioning that when you say angel, it's just loosely. You don't know. It might be your own deeper inner intuition that is talking to you.
Yes, psychologically, it could be coming from my subconscious, or even actually metaphysically.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's actually my higher self. I mean, ultimately, I feel we all unite in God. So in a way, yes, it is a part of myself, as you're a part of me, and as Cordelh's a particularly fine part of me as well. So it gets weird defining things, but yeah, I don't know if it's a delusion inside myself or if it's metaphysically real. I don't know if it has its own awareness, but it seems to me that the best way to interact with it is as if it's real and as if it has its own consciousness.
But it helped you. The point is that the way your brain perceives it, let's say the calling, somebody telling you you're supposed to do this or that because of them. It might be the way it's framed by your brain, so you accept it. I'm more interested in the result of it.
Exactly. I often say I don't worry about whether it's a delusion or an arcane.
How was it presented to you, but rather what does it give to the world?
Yes, it's whether or not it's good. So if it's a delusion, is it a good delusion or a bad one? If it's an archangel, is it a good archangel or a bad one? Yeah, that's absolutely how I look at it. Whatever it is it good? To me, it appears to be very good.
Is it good to others? You do have a large following. I actually have met some of your friends who depend on you being there, like being their father figure, actually. And if I understand correctly, you helped out a lot of guys to get out of deep depression and suicidal urges. And yeah, I would say your inner angels or your inner angel who advises you on further steps actually is a good thing, because you did help.
Well, no, I mean, I was thinking about what you were saying about angels and delusion, and I would argue that it doesn't really matter in the end, if it's an angel or a delusion, or if it's a anthropomorphization of, something that your brain needs to make sense of or whatever. As long as you somehow can make sense of it and, exist with that type of thing. Because in the end, I would argue that our very society is completely insane in many ways. A little bit before, you were mentioning that we're being asked not to be humans. And I think that's true. we being asked to have identities all of the time, and from early childhood. It can go from religion to politics to nationality to the color of skin to religion, doctrines, philosophy. It keeps on going. I mean, the list is endless of how a person can define themselves. But there is a deeper inner self. And on that level, I would say that, well, personally, I join up with most humanists. I would say that it is our humanity that is within ourselves that's literally screaming at us, be more humane, you know? And that's one of the reasons why I'm a strong believer of progress. I believe that, you know, there is only one way forward, and it's by progressing, you know, evolving into something better, adapted to our world or environment. No, I mean, like, for example, you know, like, we often talk about science and stuff like that, and the thing is, science tries to explain many things of the world, and it actually manages to do it. It shows with demonstration, you know, an exercise of demonstration and of logic, how things are. But it's not because we know how things are that our brain can totally comprehend it. For example, I remember once being in Italy, in Campobasso, which is a region, it's a valley in the middle of just mountains all around. The valley itself was completely clear night sky, and there was no light pollution, so there was the Milky Way right in the middle. And I went there with friends, and there was the season of the shooting stars, the Anaide or something like that. I forgot the name. It's basically during a period of the year there is a ton of shooting stars just flying above. And I remember being in my room at a small hotel where there was nobody. I'm pretty sure I was the only guest, to be honest. Like, I'm pretty sure I had the whole hotel for myself except for the receptionist. It was the middle of the night. I was on the balcony. I was looking out. It was completely dark, you know, like the horizon, totally freaking dark. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, thunder started to happen in the mountain. And I didn't even know that could happen, you know, like, being from the city, that was just like, wow, you know. And it makes sense, having studied geography, weather stuff, you know, like, you know, I know what a shooting star is, I know what a visual effect of it is, I can kind of explain it, I know what the Milky Way is, I can even point out some of the constellation, I know what a mountain is, I know what clouds are, and I even know what thunder is. But the whole thing together felt divine, felt beyond my comprehension as a human being, even though I could explain everything about it. I personally trace those specific moments of my life to revelations that we have, personal revelations. And I think sometimes they can be really good, and sometimes they can be really bad, but in any case, they happen. And for example, for me, I write poetry because I have a really hard time to talk about personal trauma. Not because I don't, you know, like, want to talk about it, but because I feel like saying it doesn't actually encompass the event itself. Like, what I described there perhaps when I was describing it, people are imagining, picturing this grandiose scene. But the truth is, a person has to live it to understand it, and to really, I mean, we were talking about religion, and I'm not a spiritual person, at all. So I see all those things, and to me they should be totally void of this, how can I say it, lack of understanding. Because I can explain it, but I cannot understand it, if it makes sense. And yeah, but I personally feel like in the end, for example, a few hundred years ago, people didn't have the knowledge we had, and they perceived religion in different ways. Were they crazy? Perhaps by the standard that we have today. If we took the standards we have today and we grabbed some guy or gal out of the street from the 17th century and just teleported them in the middle of the street, I bet they would be, totally confused. They wouldn't be acting like us. They wouldn't understand the nature of reality the same way we do. And then if we go 1,000 years before, then it becomes even more of a different perspective. If we go 10,000 years ago, then I don't even know what we're talking about. The conception of the universe would have been totally different than what we have nowadays.
But there you're comparing different eras, how one era can seem insane to another. But within each era, there will also be people who are insane to that culture. And there's the idea, insane, we perhaps pack too much into that word. Sometimes people will focus on whether an idea is insane or not. But for me, it's also about the phenomenological experience, like bipolar and schizophrenic people. And one culture might frame that as natural, like a shaman. Another culture can frame them as insane. But regardless of the frame, there are things that those of us with those kind of states of being, that we experience things the average person does not. Getting suicidal, for instance, Nodrik, you were saying that, observing me, I don't seem insane at all. But you didn't observe over the past few days me waking up with the sensation of a screaming demon telling me to kill myself. Should I be waking up thinking that I'm a pathetic, worthless piece of shit that should kill myself? Should I have visualizations about killing myself flowing through my head? You just didn't observe that. I've gone through that, not this morning, but the past couple mornings. My first 15 minutes was to awaken in a hellscape with my internal world full of the nastiest shit. I've learned to manage that kind of stuff. So I was present with it. I didn't suppress it. I loved it, understood why it was there. Didn't force it to go away, processed it, allowed it to pass. But I'm no less insane than I was before. I used to be an obvious disaster to the world. I used to be, all the things you would think an extremely bipolar person would be doing, upsetting everyone, damaging shit, not making sense, getting locked up, cops dragging me away into the insane asylum. It's not that I'm less crazy than I was then. It's that I've learned how to manage it. And so even when I can come across as perhaps much more grounded than I am, but my phenomenological experience is much more psychedelic. My angel is real to me. I sense energies. I get psychic thoughts. So either I live in a magical world and I have fucking magical superpowers, or I'm fucking delusional. Even though I'm articulate and logical, I understand logic and rationality, but my beliefs go beyond that.
Not only that, you do seem to be a talented artist as well, plus you are definitely a performer. You like the stage. I did hear you read your poetry, and you read it better than all of us read our own poetry. But there is another thing. What is bipolar? What is actually bipolar? Because I have never met a bipolar person in my life. Like, I probably have, but I have never suspected it. Like, if I would meet you and I would hang out with you, I would never even suspect you have any, that you would in any way be different from me. I actually naturally assume that everybody is exactly like me. I don't know what
people have breakdowns, Nodrik, and when people that are bipolar have breakdowns, it's pretty bad, usually. Well,
never
of my
met or seen any.
Yeah.
And well, there's plenty of footage of me in extreme states on my channel. You just haven't come across it. For me, essence of bipolar.
I'm lazy, so I don't do my research diligently. Sorry. Being bipolar, the way the general understanding, which is extremely limited, is having those sudden changes in your perception of reality. On one side, you feel okay, then the moment clicks, and you do see everything in a different way.
Okay, so, and I don't worry so much about what the DSM says. I'm not so concerned about other people's opinion of bipolar anymore, now that I've learned to manage it my own way. So I frame it differently than the medical model, and I knew more about the medical model in the past. I haven't paid attention to it in a while, so I'm not going to get all the details right here necessarily. But essentially what you were talking about, that quick change of moods, is you're talking more about bipolar type 2. So there's 2 or even 3 classifications of bipolar, depending. Mm-hmm. And through Europe, there's also a scale of 1 to 10 that we don't use here. So there's both types and intensities. Mm-hmm. Also, in every category, like even 2 people who were both type 1 bipolar might be very different from each other. Because it's like, say there's a dozen symptoms, you have 6 or more, you're bipolar. So one person could have symptoms 1 through 6, but not 7 through 12. And one person could have 7 through 12 and not 1 through 6. But my particular flavor of bipolar disorder, it doesn't involve so much the rapid shifts. I go through long cycles. And in fact, I've never talked to anyone else who's gone through cycles as long as mine used to be. So bipolar type 2 it's called rapid cycling. Throughout the day, they'll suddenly be depressed. Then, they're manic. And essentially bipolar is about going between depression and mania. For me, my cycle's quite long. Type 1 bipolar, your cycles should be weeks or months long. My cycle now is a year long. And it's synced up to the seasons very nicely. So I start getting manic in the spring. I tend to be manic through spring and summer. I get depressed in the fall. Winter's my death. And for me, I line it up with the cycle of the male forest god and turn it all mythological and such. But initially, my first 2 cycles were actually 3 years long, where my psychosis would you start with what's called hypomania, so that's just mild mania. It builds to mania for me. Then mania turns into complete psychosis, psychotic break, where I'm in an alternate dimension. For me, those first 2 cycles, I only came down from the psychosis by being locked up in a mental institution and given heavy drugs. And then after the mania comes depression. And my first 2 depressions were 2 years long. like 2 full years of being depressed, where it kind of tapers off at the end, like it gets mild and then eases off. It's not a sudden thing. But the center of both of those, I had 18 months of being purely suicidal, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for a year and a half twice. Like not a moment of joy, not a moment of pleasure. And so in its most fundamental, it's that like everyone can get sad. Sadness is when something sad happens that makes you sad. Depression is when there's no reason for it. Nothing happened. You just suddenly are depressed. And for me, I go through a cycle of depression and mania. Now, for some people, it's as mild as that. And for some people, mania doesn't go into psychosis. So other symptoms of mania are just you eat less, you sleep less, you're full of energy, you'll be really, really talkative, you have racing thoughts, but also your inhibitions get lower. You're more likely to engage in risky behavior. You might start gambling, doing drugs, being sexually promiscuous. But for me, it goes further to the psychotic features. Delusions of psychic abilities. Delusions of gods or angels interacting with me. And that's something that it seems some people have that weird experience that you can either frame as mystical, or you can frame it as psychological, or you can say, actually, fuck, this is beyond my comprehension. I'm going to examine it from every way possible, and I'm not going to define it. I'm going to try to learn how to surf this thing, how to live with it, as opposed to defining it.
Were you able to create? I'm sorry.
Well, I was gonna say I have some friends that are so bipolar, so I dealt with that as a friend, you know, like somebody that really cares for people that are that, and I know that for them it's really hard, and it can be really hard for the people that are close to them too.
I made my poor family cry so many times, like my poor mother and sister especially, what I put them through those first 6 years. Heartbreaking. And yeah, unfortunately, we don't seem to know what to do with fucking nut jobs like me in modern society. Well, some people, the psychiatric model helps them, like significantly. And for some people, that does get them right back on track. But fuck, it is hard to be this way. And honestly, the way I frame it is I frame it like that I'm a dimensional traveler. Well, I'll tie it into in the Bible when it says, the kingdom of God is laid before men's eyes, yet they do not see. I believe the same is true of hell, that all of heaven and hell is laid out before our eyes. And while I both believe in them as metaphysical realities, places, dimensions beyond this, they're also both present right here. You can get yourself into a materialist mindset where you think what's around you is the atoms and the energies, and since consciousness and phenomenological experience aren't understood by science, you can ignore them. But if you look at us each instead as the generator of a reality, each of us is the center of a universe. Like, in my universe, you are both right there. In Nodrik's universe, she's not on the screen. She's the center of her universe, looking at us. Cordelh, you're the center of your universe, looking at us. And that, what we think of as objective reality is in fact only our hallucination. That's the one thing that's been made clear to me. When you look at the table, you don't perceive atoms. You don't see the waves, you know, all the gamma radiation or whatever. We don't see what's there. We hallucinate something, interact with what's there. And when you change your nature, you change your universe. And it seems to me our universes are connected, and that actually influences reality. But the way I phenomenologically experience this, it feels more real to make it mythical and to say, I die in the winter. I go into the underworld. Suicidal depression is traveling into hell. It's like in the never-ending story, going into the swamp of sadness. It's a different dimension that you exist in. And that's why you feel so alone around family and friends who care for you but don't understand. Because you can see that to them the world's okay. But to you, it's a hellscape. There's no pleasure anywhere. The colors aren't as bright. But at the same time, heaven is right in front of us. I did a great podcast with audience member James. It's great. Well, we've done a number of podcasts, but we had one where he was talking about wanting to find that connection to the divine. You've heard me talk about the experience of seeing heaven on earth. And among other things, I advised him to spend some time out in nature in isolation with no electronics. And he went and did that and came back and did another podcast. It's called We Found Heaven and Cried Because You Weren't There. And he found it too. There's a place right in front of you where if you can tune into it, everything shines with love, and like that the light on a pile of dog shit is glorious, and that everything is beautiful. And when you get there and you think of someone else you love, it is just heartbreaking to think that you can't show them. To think that even if I grabbed my child by the hand and walked them out into this field with me and said, look, it's heaven all around us, that they can't see it. But it's all fucking there. And to me, some types of insanity are plugging into the metaphysical reality beyond us. And so I see myself as a dimensional traveler. Well, for instance, when I'm helping someone who's suicidal, the way I prepare myself for that private session is, okay, somebody's in hell. I'm a psychopath. I can go into hell. I'm going to go on this call, connect to this person, and try to get as deeply into their hell as I can. Not to block it, not to deny it, but to try to connect as profoundly as I can to the precise dimension of hell they're in. Tune right into their specific pain, and just to meet them there and tell them that I love them and that it's okay, and that if they want to, we can try to find a way out, because I'm okay. I can get out of here.
The way I relate to all that you're saying is through writing. I create words whenever I write. You know, it's all.
You create them when you just think about them, and you share it with others when you write.
Yeah.
But I believe in the thought realm, whether it's like the realm of platonic forms, or it's the collective unconscious, or it's the morphic resonance field that Rupert Sheldrake talks about, or or any of this shit, or the Akashic records, like whatever it is. There's a dimension to me where thought is the stuff of the dimension itself. And it seems to me that we connect to that when you're in that artistic mood, you're not making things up out of nowhere. You're actually connecting to something, to another dimension. You're actually a traveler, exploring, discovering things, but they're things that don't exist down here. But you have to give it a face. You have to wrap words around it. Carry it out with you, if that makes sense.
Mercury, when you go through stages, I understand that before that it was longer. The suicidal depression took up to 18 months. You are an artist. You are a painter. I also witnessed you write poetry, like right in front of us, basically, during a conversation. And you're pretty good at it. So, during the stages, the creative process, the time you do it, is it regardless of the stage you're currently in? And the stage just affects the content? Or you only create during specific stages? because that is interesting to me. The creative process where you actually write a poem, make a drawing. How does it work in your case, particular?
Well, the thing is, I barely do any of that. I don't consider myself an artist at all, to tell you the truth. I have artistic ability, but like the drawing I showed you is from over 10 years ago. In the past 10 years, I haven't drawn anything at all except some birthday cards for my kids. I showed you 2 poems that I've written, maybe a couple others I played around with, but nothing ever worth keeping. But none of them, those other 2 poems I showed you, I didn't write them to show them to anyone.
Well,
I was manic when... Well, the first one, actually, I was working out my feelings. Call Me a Fool.
Yeah, the Call Me a Fool is actually the first one you read. We tried to read it with Cordelh, and both of us could not just even nearly grasp because of the wordplay. It actually, like, it was constructed as a jokingly tongue breaker. Call Me a Fool. It was a gesture poem. Like, it was a poem that I could feel that it is a gesture in front of the king poem.
Well, what I did, like, the reason I wrote that poem was showing you. I was having trouble accepting that I was insane. And I worked it out through writing that, or I partially was working it out through writing the poem. And in the first 2 words, I mean the fool both ways, because I was now insane. It's the bottom, it's the gutter, it's a garbage person. From, like, and I don't mean, spiritual. Like, I'm not talking the spiritual perspective.
Most of the artists are insane people, and I actually value. I don't know. I wouldn't. I don't. Just like, I don't know. I try not to sound insensitive, but it don't feel like an insane person is somebody not normal. I don't know if it makes sense. And insanity is actually applicable to a lot of human beings, like really a lot. So much that in the modern standard it's already a norm. People are actually heavily medicated nowadays instead of dealing with problem. And for me, that is insanity. And a person who deals and who is aware of the issues and the problems and actually is able to have a coherent thought, I would not call it an insane or definitely not a garbage person.
Okay, but I wasn't talking about your perspective. I was talking about, I was still dealing with the mainstream perspective, the materialist, society-driven perspective, which is why I was addressing the king and his court. But what I was doing was combining the fool as the insult with the idea of the jester. And the next word, better that than general. I meant that doubly as in the one sense of a general in an army. Like, call me a jester rather than an army general. But I also meant call me insane. Better that than normal. Like general in the sense of normal. And then
I read the second meaning actually into it when I tried to read your poem.
And so then the whole poem was me trying to accept my place in the gutter of society, where I am not respected by authority or the mainstream. I'm aware there's others like you who don't view crazy people like that, but there's a mainstream feeling about the way we're judged, and that's what I was working through in that poem. But after that, I wrote the next poem, the untitled one. I just wrote it one day because I was manic and my mind was racing, and I thought, fuck, I wonder what I would write if I wrote it. So I wrote that one. And then that was like, 3 years ago. And then I wrote a poem the other day because you guys keep talking about poetry. So I was like, fuck it, I'll write a poem right now. But so I don't consider myself an artist. I don't draw. I don't play music anymore. I don't do tattoos anymore. I don't write. And I have no ambition to accomplish anything. I have no deep desire to express myself through art. My imagination, my creativity is enough for me. Like, I feel no need to share it with the world. And so even though I have those abilities, I don't I don't feel like an artist. Because an artist is somebody who actively makes art. I'm just somebody with the potential to produce art.
Mercury, did you express yourself artistically more before the accident, or it was always like that in your
I
life?
expressed myself more artistically before the accident. I drew a lot as a child, is how I developed that skill. As a teenager, I played in punk bands and got really into music. And then, like when I turned 20 and made friends with Lloyd Kaufman, that was because I was interested in getting into independent film. Yeah, back then. Like the old me before the accident wanted to accomplish things, wanted to prove himself to the world, deeply cared what other people thought, had a need to express himself artistically. Lost all that. I feel satisfied in my own being. I feel satisfied in simply living. Although, actually, and I'll correct myself, there's one art form that obviously I've taken up extensively. The art of conversation. I am actively practicing the art of conversation on a regular basis. Now, most people don't call that an artist, but if you include the art of conversation, then I'm a very active artist. I currently express myself primarily through the art of conversation.
It is an art, and I witnessed you practice it, so yeah.
And I consider anything that's an art as magic. Magic is the great art. Speaking is magic. Like every thought, like to me, every thought I think is a prayer. Every word I speak is a spell. So this is all like mystical shit to me.
Would you like to read us a poem? Or how would you feel? Would you feel comfortable to read the gesture poem?
Can I go second? Can I listen to a poem first and then I'll read?
Definitely, 100%, 100%. Cordelh, would you like to share a poem?
Sure. Let's see. I'll read an old one. Let's see, something that's good. I'll read Time is Meaningless. Seconds are like minutes. They are like hours. Hours are like days. They are like weeks and months. They have a way to unleash their powers and race through months to years in front. 1 second can last an eternity, not only in causality's ripple, but also in morale's infirmity, or even us physically crippled. Years can be like seconds, forever stuck on time's arrow from my pocket's watch. While all my life could feel a garbage truck, and life itself was drawing from Rorschach, in the end, seconds are part of the void. Soon, years can be decades and centuries, and that ending's grip can't be avoided. Life itself is our penitentiary. Or that is not really liberation. That knowledge that every person we love will suffer from life and death rotation is a reminder of what we get rid of. When what we get rid of is our own self, by lying to the point of believing anything that comes from any bookshelf. Every seconds and words can be deceiving.
I love that.
I figured it would be adequate.
Yeah, especially after talking about time freezing earlier. That went very well.
Every seconds and words could be deceiving. Yeah.
Do you want to read one Nodrik while I find mine?
Yeah. I will read the latest one. It's called The Golden Heart. I went alone into the unknown to see what was my prize. And when I saw it in the darkness, God, I was surprised. My prize was a loyal golden heart, boxed in a broken cage. It looked at me with brown eyes, concealing hidden rage. Why are you crying, dear heart? I asked with open arms. The heart replied, my cage is crushed. I know I can be harmed. How can I help you, dear heart? Can I repair your cage? Thank you for asking. But you can't. It's crushed by pain and rage. I looked at it without a sound, then took it in my hands. The cage fell into the ground, revealing hidden scars. Some scars were healed, others inflamed. Golden light was turning black. They started healing in my hands, so I held it till the light was back. It shines bright without the cage, looks at me with loving eyes, kindness, outcasted rage, a loyal golden heart is my prize.
I love that poem. It's beautiful.
Yeah, me too.
You could see the personality always in a poem somehow.
Yes, especially if you listen to a few, because both of you have read me a number of poems. There's a certain energy to both of your stuff that you just see in poem after poem, even if you're using very different metaphors. Part of you, well, I guess that's not true of all poets, but I'd say the ones who are actually expressing something deep about themselves, because some people write very superficial poetry, where they're writing about ideas. You both seem to be writing very much about your experiences.
Well, we are lucky to have experience, I guess. I guess. That moment when people realize that luggage and experience is the same thing. Gosh.
Yeah. Luggage and the experience is the same thing. Yeah. Okay.
So would you do us the honor, Mercury?
Yeah, actually, when Mercury reads it, I always feel like I'm at this theater performance. Man, you do everything so theatrical.
Pulling it up. Okay, I'll do my best. All right, so this is that poem I wrote when I was in the process of trying to accept that I was insane. It's called Call Me a Fool. Call me a fool. Better that than general. Ridicule me, my king, but spare me your respect. Expect of me jesting and juggling, stumbling and stammering. Look to me not for braying and brawling, slaying and slaughtering. Make a mockery of this mere minor madman, and march those most mighty magistrates off to your wars. Let them slake their thirst for glory on the blood of your foes, and leave me to get barmy on thy mead with all the beggars and whores.
I like how Cordelh likes the ending.
True.
Remember, it was like, oh, all the beggars and horse, my type of party, my
Yeah.
man.
I
Yeah,
press.
that's why he and I get along so well.
It's the right crowd.
Yes.
Honestly.
Yeah, because beggars and horse do not judge.
And they listen
Those
to
are the
poetry.
ones Jesus hung
Well,
out with.
they don't think they're better than any of us. And this is the best crowd to hang out with when you feel low. Yeah, sucks being judged. So, that would be it for today. Please subscribe to Mercury Black's channel, Sorting Myself Out. All the links are provided below, as well as an invitation to join Mercury's Discord channel, as well as Cordelh's Tinder Poet Society. Yeah, we wish you good evening, good morning, or good day, whatever time of the day you have. Guys, please.
Goodbye, everybody. And we hope to see you soon again for perhaps some poetry reading in Tinder Poet Society and in the other readings we do. And yeah.
And thanks to both of you for having me on. I loved this. And yeah, to the audience, God bless and lunatic love to all.
Thank you, Mercury, for being with us. Like, it's always a delight, man. I'm sure Cordelh will hang out with you for the next 5 hours. Bye. Okay.
Bye.